You hear me? Okay. Good morning, everybody. You know, it's a big room. We're not taking it all. We're really going to work over here. So if you're going to leave early, I understand. But if you migrate over to this area, it might be better. So you can see this table over here. It might be a little, if we consolidate. Thank you. Okay, I want to start off with some really exciting news for everybody. So I want to congratulate everyone in this room because by the time you leave this room, you're going to be in the top 1% of experts of copper. You really will. You'll be ahead of the literature. There's only one, maybe two professors that I can think of that will understand what you understand. So I wanted to congratulate you that in advance. That's just kind of a quick history from where Mitosynergy came from. It's kind of our little timeline. It's kind of and to nutshell the story, my nephew became injured. That's what brought me into this industry. I didn't choose the industry, it chose me. And honestly, it needed an outsider to understand copper. And no disrespect to those highly educated, but unfortunately, when you get so educated down your expertise, you can't look out and see everything else. So, and no disrespect, but because of their research and their PhDs and their time invested, it gave me the tools to put all these pieces together. So, with that said, so my nephew got hurt. We figured out copper. I met Marge, got some partners because of victims that they have as well in their own life. Her son was suffering from Lyme's disease. And, you know, I hate to say that this helps this or that, the other to name something, but I love to say that when you give your body what your body needs to help itself, our bodies are amazing. Our bodies are simply amazing. And we depend on our body to do the job. It's amazing. So, anyways, that's our history in a nutshell. What we're going to cover here, for some of you that understand this, I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of recap on some fundamentals like of cell respiration, and we'll go through it really fast, but I just want to make sure that for those that aren't familiar with cell respiration and what have you, that we're all on the same page so we can all get this, okay? Okay, so we're going to start off with that. Just a quick raise of hands. Who in here is familiar with cell respiration? Beautiful. And who in here knows what the word ATP means? Great. Electron transport chain? Complex 4? All right, beautiful, beautiful. Okay. So cell respiration is basically, it talks about our currency. It's our refinery. It's our currency of life, right? If our body was the local economy, it would be money. If our body was a car, it'd be gasoline. It's just the currency. ATP is the currency, right, that our body uses, and it's made in cell respiration. Now, when you use, for every molecule of sugar, what happens is it starts off in glycolysis outside of the mitochondria, inside the cell, and your yield is 2 ATP. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things going on, but all I want you to think about is that when cell respiration is happening and ATP is being made, that the first factory, glycolysis, you yield 2 ATP, okay? That's it. Now then once glycolysis ends, and it ends up with something called pyruvate that can turn into acetyl-CoA, that can now feed into your Krebs cycle, and your yield is 2 ATP, okay? So far are you with me? You yield 2 ATP from glycolysis, and you yield 2 ATP from the Krebs cycle, our citric acid cycle. Same thing. Now, electron transport chain, booyah, 34 ATP. So a quick recap, cell respiration, 3 little factories, 2, 2, 34. Glycolysis, Krebs, electron transport chain. So can you see how important the electron transport chain is? If you just take a quick look at ATP being the currency of life, 2, 2, 34. Okay, so we're done with that. Okay, cell respiration, 2, 2, 34. Remember 34, remember electron transport chain. So why is ATP important? Why is this currency so important? And especially if I have a child or a person that's toxic and I have cells that are toxic, why is it important? So this little video doesn't work, but the good news that you're here and you get to see me point at it. This little right here, this is how ATP turns into ADP. And what happens is, you take a triphosphate and it connects to it. And, well, I guess the first thing we have to understand and back up a little bit is there's 2 ways to come in and out of a cell, right? We have passive and active transport, right? Passive transport is water and oxygen. But neurotransmission, nutrition, toxins, either or to come in and out of the cell, that requires active transport. And active transport is dependent on ATP. Why is it dependent on ATP? Because of mechanisms like this, where an ATP will connect, it will make it change shape, and it will push the toxin out. It will stimulate exocytosis. It will make it so now the toxin's finally out of the cell. But again, you have to have the ATP to do that, okay? And you have to have intercellular ATP. Okay, so now here we're talking about copper. Copper, right? Well, who in here, just a quick raise of hands, and you can't hurt my feelings, trust me. Who in here believes at this point, with what you understand, that copper is a terrible thing to ever put in your body? Okay, I don't have a problem with that. And I'm here to tell you you're right until now. But you're right. Okay, interesting. Okay, so copper's number 29 on the periodic table. Who in here is familiar with this guy right here? Right, all right. So you see each of these numbers, right? Each one has a different number. What that number really represents is, when it's a stable element, that's how many protons and how many electrons it has. So if you see copper, it's number 29. Number 29. That means it has this piece of copper. For every 29 protons that are holding in my hand, I have 29 electrons to match it. It's like a penny. Same thing, okay? Now here's where it gets really interesting. And to me, if you want to say, well, this was the beginning of the experts not understanding and the common sense kicking in, all right? What you're looking at here, these little numbers, what they represent is when an element oxidizes, it loses a set amount of electrons. When an element oxidizes, it loses a set amount of electrons. They're all pre-calculated, okay? Now, if you go up to copper, Cu, right there towards the end, notice it has a 1,2. Has a 1,2 oxidative state. First of all, copper is the only mineral that you want to put in your body that has that. You won't see that in any other mineral. Secondly, the only other element in the whole universe that has a 1,2 oxidative state is mercury. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Now, I particularly find that very interesting because I believe that there's a lot to do with oxidative state and how you can pass cell membrane. So you ask yourself, how does mercury get to a mitochondria? I find that very interesting because copper gets to the mitochondria, proper copper. Copper in the correct oxidative state. It's got a path right to the mitochondria. So I theorize that the mercury is able to do that simply because it's able to match the oxidative state of copper. But nevertheless, so go back to the 1,2. So what exactly does that mean? That means in nature, when this gets wet and it oxidizes, it's going to lose 2 electrons. That's what's going to happen. When it oxidizes, it's going to lose 2 electrons. It's going to turn blue. It's going to turn blue like the copper in there. It's going to turn blue, okay? So the 2 coppers here on the end, one of them is in this chart, it's the red copper, and the one right next to it is blue. That is the exact same copper. It's the same copper. The only thing that is different is 1 electron. So remember, copper had the 2,1 oxidative state. When it's blue, it's lost the 2 electrons. Okay? Now it's water soluble. Now it can attach to a water ligand. When it's given back 1 electron, it turns a brilliant color, like in nature. For example, this copper is the same. It's a copper 1. This is a copper 1 glycine. All copper glycine and all dietary supplements are blue, like this. This is what you get, okay? This copper glycine is purple, and it turns blue inside your cell, not outside your cell. It oxidizes where it's supposed to, okay? So this is an amino acid copper chelate. This is the most common copper found in dietary supplements, plant copper. This is what we named CUNA-MSPR, stands for copper, neuro, muscle, spirit, human copper. Our cells of our body are 60 to 70% water. Isn't this interesting when you take plant copper and you drop water on it, that it rolls off like that? Doesn't seem to like it. Human copper loves water because our cells are 60 to 70% water. Because things good for us like water. And things that are bad for us don't like water. Now we can force the issue like we do when we take dietary supplements. This is what's going on in our belly. Heavy metals accumulating, building up in our brain, our extracellular matrix, in our liver. That's what's happening with this because it's plant copper. And our plants are starving for it and our plants need it. And when our plants get it, it makes human copper. This dissolves so nice, so smooth. When this copper 1, cuprous copper, copper for humans, it's going to change color. Because in the cell, now the copper has made it into the cell, inside the cell is where it's supposed to oxidize and deliver its electron nutrition. This copper can never get into the cell because, again, copper 2 is stuck on the outside. It can't cross the cell membrane, nor can it bind to copper-carrying chaperones. But now this copper easily gets into the cell. Once absorbed into the cell, now we're in the cell. Now watch, here comes the magic. So several minutes into it, just applying water, here the plant copper has not changed color, and when I rub it, it's gritty like a piece of sandpaper. And the human copper has changed color, and it's just so smooth. It's so smooth. So smooth.
bioavailable human copper. So just to reiterate, the human cell will not let plant copper into it. It has to be human copper. Human copper goes into the cell, then turns into copper 2 inside the cell. Then the body knows what to do with it. Then our body has waste, excretes the copper, it goes back to soil, and the process is done all over again.
Oh, yep, there we go. That was a lot easier than doing it up here. And we could do the exact same thing up here, and I have water, and I have the copper, but because, I want to try to get to this a little bit faster than I did last year, because I really want to answer some questions at the end of this. So I'm kind of going through really fast, and hopefully there's a couple of great questions, because the best way that we're all going to really walk out of here, that 1%, masters of the universe in copper, is if you guys ask good questions, because we learn from questions, okay? All right. Okay. So to go back to that reference as I speak of plant copper, human copper. So I like to say that copper that looks like this is earth copper. This is copper for Mother Earth. Our Mother Earth copper gets weathered and it oxidizes and it turns blue like the copper in the top corner. Turns blue like this copper right here. And that's important so it can dissolve in water. And then when that plant copper goes in to the root, it goes from copper 2 to copper 1. This is very, very important. Also, this presentation will be available. So for those that are taking note, this presentation will be online afterwards, so don't stress out if I'm going fast. So why this is important? Why is it important that it's copper 2? Because copper 2 does not have the ability to attach to a copper-carrying chaperone, copper-carrying protein, a copper chaperone. It cannot connect to it. Secondly, like I said, the copper 2 cannot pass the cell membrane. But what plant copper can do, when you put it in the human body, it can leak through digestive membrane. Once it's leaked through digestive membrane, once the copper treats our body like a plant, okay, now we have the wrong oxidative state of copper on the wrong side of the cell membrane. And it builds and accumulates in our extracellular matrix. What does it love first? Brain and liver. We all know this. It's been going on for years. It was so simple. It was because, in my humble opinion, outside of Kunamaspur, the world's first proper copper, bioavailable copper, all copper in all dietary supplements, in all processed food, and in all drinking water is for plants. It's not for humans. And for some reason, we've been led to believe it's okay to do that. It's crazy. It's madness. In the simplest way you can say to a doctor or a nutritionist, I'm going to try to say this without being too vulgar, but from the tip of my tongue to where food comes out of my body, there is no reductase for copper. And if there is, I want someone to show it to me. I want someone to show it to me, because it doesn't exist. What is a reductase? Simply, when you have copper 2 and you want copper 1 so your body can use it, you need a plant in the middle. You have to have a plant fix the copper. You have to have a plant give that copper back an electron. Has to happen. We can't eat dirt, right? I mean, if we could, there'd be no starvation in the world. We'd all just eat dirt. So it's just really that simple. That's what it really boils down to. And the madness has to stop. So now that you are all an expert, you understand the truth. It's now your responsibility as well, still mine. I can't just brush it off. But we have to tell the world about this, and we have to educate. We have to tell our doctors. We have to tell our friends. We have to champion so people can understand. Because copper is extremely important. It's extremely important to our bodies. This picture is a perfect example. Each one of these little green star doohickey guys here, that's all copper. Look at all those organelles that are dependent on bioavailable copper. So again, you remember we talked about cell respiration, 2-2-34? Do you see? This is the mitochondria. Without bioavailable copper, you don't get that 34. Your cell does not get to make the 34 ATP. Complex 4, cytochrome C oxidase, same thing, is copper dependent. Did y'all know that? Raise your hand if you knew that. Okay, do you understand how cyanide works? Cyanide stops complex 4. Cyanide stops the production of ATP. Literally, you die in 8 seconds. Our hearts only have 8 seconds of reserve ATP. So is copper important? Is ATP important? Yeah, it's very important. And this is the critical mass. This is why we're in so much trouble. Because for over 100 years, they've been depleting the soils. When they stopped putting the cow manure back in the dirt, we started having problems. That's really where this all started. When we got so big in agriculture and we thought we could outsmart Mother Nature, that's the fundamental problem here. So now you compound that because our grains and our grasses can't feed it to our livestock. So everyone in this room is starving for bioavailable copper. And at the same time, we're all probably carrying a load of plant copper. So when you tell somebody, hey, you're copper toxic and you're copper deficient at the same time, that's like the weirdest statement, but it's the truth. I've literally seen doctors arguing, grown men, PhDs, doctors, no, everyone's copper toxic. No, everyone's starving for copper. Yes, you're both right, and it's just like, it's madness. It's got to stop. So now it's all your responsibility, okay? Join the party. Look at all of the organelles. Now, the one that I really like to focus on, and people like to bring up bacterial diseases, but you see down at the bottom where it says bacterium and pathogen? If you have bacteria in your cell, the only thing that I know of, that's going to work on that intercellular bacteria is what God gave us to work on bacteria. He gave us copper. That's what he gave our human body to balance bacteria. With that said, I want you also to consider your body is 90% bacteria. We put ourselves in a blender and pour ourselves out. Only 10% of that drink is us. And the other 90% is bacteria, right? So how important is bacteria balance to our 90% bacteria body? And if copper is God's given way to balance bacteria, copper's so important. So the big disconnect in the world is copper's bad. Well, yeah, because we've been eating plant copper. And again, show me where you can reduce copper in the digestive system, right? So they name this presentation molecular electron nutrition, right? So men technology. And really that was just my way, because I noticed I was talking to women more than men. Notice the room is more women than men. So I had to come up with a way to try to get attention. And the only way I could ever get a woman's attention is, hey, would you like to learn about men technology? And you get their attention for about 2 seconds, right? And then when you say molecular electron nutrition, you've earned about 5 more seconds. But, so that's what men technology is, molecular electron nutrition, okay? And the reason I like this analogy is because I like to make a comparison between a car and a human body. My father was a master mechanic, and that was always just an easy way for me to understand stuff. And when you work on a car, you work on the cylinder and you work your way backwards when the car won't start. Okay? Who knew that? Beautiful. The reason you do that is you look for one of 3 things to be missing, right? You look for oxygen, air, you look for fuel, and you look for spark. Well, I'm here to tell you that the mitochondria is the same as the cylinder of the car. Because the cylinder of the car is where we convert our fuel to energy in the form of horsepower. And in the mitochondria is where we convert our sugar, or our fuel, to ATP in the form of ATP, right? And guess what it needs? Fuel, oxygen, and spark, right? So I like to say copper, having that electron, is the electron nutrition. It's the missing spark. It's the missing piece. Okay, so this, again, is to reiterate about copper and complex 4. This is the electron transport chain. And if you study these little mechanisms, cytochrome C complex 4 has to have copper. Now notice right before copper is iron. It's your last mineral you need. So I like to call copper the spark plug of the cylinder. And I like to call the iron the spark plug wire. Now the cool thing about our spark plugs is they don't need the wire. They're already pre-charged. They only get to work one time. So I don't ever want to say that this copper is some magical miracle. It's a missing piece to a very complex puzzle, and everything else still matters. But it is sure nice to get a little bump start and get a little molecular electron nutrition or little men action, every now and then. So it's really nice. So I promise. No. Okay. So going back to how important is copper, I like to bring up superoxide demustase because what we're really talking about are oxygen-free radicals. Did you know to neutralize oxygen-free radicals requires copper, bioavailable copper? Anyone know that? Okay. And did you know why is oxygen a free radical? It's because it's missing one electron. It's missing one electron. Oxygen becomes so damaging to our body that it can actually damage our DNA by missing one electron. Our copper, plant copper, it's missing one electron. I'm telling you, man, one electron matters. If there's a word you want to write down or research from today, the word's chemiosmotic. That is the word of the moment, chemiosmotic. When I first educated myself, I said that word was monoelectrono. That's what I called it, okay? But plants, humans, and batteries, we are all chemiosmotic. It's just single electrons going across a gradient. We have that all in common. Single electrons going across a gradient. So now we're talking about our copper a little bit, and our copper is the correct oxidative state, and it's chelated with something called nicotinic acid, which is niacin. Nicotinic acid is the glorified word for niacin, B3. It's very interesting how our molecule looks very similar to the same molecule that neutralizes oxygen-free radicals. This is a quick little graph of a human study we did. And in our human study, we did 58 subjects. We gave them only the raw ingredient. We gave them 0.5 milligram a day. This is showing increased ATP in blood platelets. Are we all familiar with what blood platelets are? So we like to look at them because it's a full eukaryotic cell, so you can actually measure cell respiration. So simply by giving somebody copper, we watch their ATP go up. Also, there was a symptom-based questionnaire, and we actually had a 51% bump over placebo in people's quality of life. And again, this will all be available. I'm going kind of fast, so I'm hoping we're going to get some questions out of here. So this is the copper that we have in our mitosynergy complex. Mitosynergy is a product that has a mito cocktail and the copper put together. I don't know if these are going to work. We'll find out. Okay, so those won't work either. But basically what you have there is you have a lady who is 94 years old, and she has dementia and Alzheimer's, and she's non-vocal. And it's very interesting because in one serving of bioavailable copper, she was talking. And I have the video on my computer if anybody wants to see and doesn't believe me. It's really cool. My mom adopted her from church, and what was really cool is that for the last year of her life, last 9 months of her life, she became cognitive again. And she was able to have relationship with her family before she passed. So that's, I mean, those are the kind of reasons that I do what I do. You know, that's just like, you can't put money on that, right? It's just, so. Okay, I'll leave the recap up here. So, does anybody have any questions? Yes. Great question. Great question. I'm going to try to recap it. If I stray, stop me in my tracks, okay? So her question was, in a nutshell, when we get the correct kind of copper and we start to bring balance back to our life, are we going to have a detox reaction? Because, yeah, are we going to have an antibacterial pathogen reaction? Absolutely. And I am so glad you brought this question up, because to me this is the most important thing to address when it comes to this copper technology, because far too often I see people start this and they don't finish. They stop because they're having a reaction. They stop because it's working. They stop because they took too much and they went too fast and they didn't purge their lymphatic as they did it. What I like to talk about, what we do, is a push-pull technology. Okay, it's a push-pull technology. By giving that electron transport chain, electron nutrition, and firing up that cell, you're going to push those toxins out into the lymphatic. And then we have a product, and I'm really here to educate than to try to sell product. But a product like our mud bath, our clay, something where you can go and soak and get your lymphatic system purging, that's how you're going to pull those toxins out of the body after you push them out of the cell. So great question. And if you don't do that, and you don't drink a lot of water, and you go too fast, yes, you will put yourself in a major Herx type situation. Go ahead. I don't use the ionic foot bath. I'd be interested, and I would say there would be some possibility where I could see those two could do a push-pull together. I could see that being a great possibility. Great question. So we asked for natural sources for copper 1 to get bioavailable copper. Where can we get that? I'm glad you brought up kale, because kale cabbage, kale's a cabbage, by the way, kale cabbage is your best source of copper 1 in a plant. Again, the fundamental problem, though, is the kale cabbage soil has been deprived of the copper. And then the proteins, great. Liver, that's a great source of copper, but again, the grains have been deprived. So everything's already depleted of the copper up front. So the best way is to grow your own kale cabbage and put copper in the dirt. Put the copper they're trying to put in our dietary supplements, put it in your garden. And that's really the best copper there is. And also what's interesting about the kale cabbage is that our copper glycine is the same color of kale cabbage when it blooms. And after we wet it and it oxidizes, it turns blue. And when you're trying to do Mother Nature's chemistry, it's our fundamental principle that when we chelate a mineral, we only use what's found in soil and in plant. We never will use a chemical, because it wasn't there. It wasn't meant to be in our body. And that's how we make these perfect, beautiful micron crystalline that's brilliant in color and changes blue after you wet it. Yes, ma'am. Is there anybody that should not be taking this product? No. No, everybody. It's such a simple answer, because ATP is important. And I could kind of be facetious a little bit and say, is there anybody that should take cyanide? If we want them to die. So then no, if you want them to die. So, but yes, but no, but thank you. Yes. Great question. Great question. I like these questions. Thank you for that great question. She says, so, how do you know? You can say this copper, when it's too blue, it's no longer for your body, it's now plant copper. How do you know that when I put that in there, it doesn't turn blue in my stomach, and now I got the plant copper basically anyways? I know because we went through the trouble with the FDA to get something called a new dietary ingredient notification. And you know, everyone always wants to bag on the FDA, and I used to kind of want to bag on them a little bit too, but because of my experience with them, I have a bigger belief in them because of what they held me accountable to do and the things they required from me to say to you, I have an ingredient that's safe for humans, okay? And one of the things they made me prove was what happens to the copper in the stomach environment. And so we had our in-house PhD biochemist recreate the stomach conditions. And what is so cool about bioavailable copper, does not oxidize in the stomach. It does not oxidize in the stomach. It holds the correct oxidative state. And when you look at simple chemistry, it's because of the pH. And it's something in an acidic environment holds its oxidative state. Go ahead. I'll come back. Yes. And that's a path we're still exploring for the best way to go down that path, but guaranteed proper copper will help your body fight improper copper because, again, at the end of the day, ATP fixes everything. It's just kind of like, you know, when you can't pay your bills and all of a sudden you got a whole bunch of money, fixes everything, okay? So, yes. That's a great question. So now she's bringing up, and I believe what you're discussing is actually a chronic situation across the country. It starts off with Tums and antacids and all these things I put in there, and they make our body not work the way it's supposed to. So she's asking, what happens when you put something into a very neutral pH stomach in the first place? Could it oxidize? And yes, it could. And that's a problem that you face for any slow oxidizer. And this is the reason that we have something called a mitomelt, where you go ahead and let it absorb in your mouth, okay? And this is the reason we also have a liposome product. So with that said, if you have somebody who's a slow oxidizer that gets really burpy after they eat, basically, it's important that you maybe look at the melt or you look at the lipo. Another great question. Yes, ma'am. Okay, another great question, man. So we should have just did questions because this is how we learn, right? She asked a great question. Her question was, she says she comes here and gets all this product, but nobody really explains how do you introduce it into your regimen? How do you use it in your protocol? Great question. Here's what's unique about copper. Number one is when you're supplementing copper, I do recommend you supplement zinc as well. Zinc they can't screw up because zinc comes in one oxidative state. But never, ever, ever, ever take zinc and copper together at the same time. And also because copper is a unique supplement, okay? Only take copper alone by 30 minutes. Copper must be taken alone. So when you take our Mito Activator, start your day with it. 30 minutes later, you can go ahead and eat your breakfast or take your other supplements. If you at all get an upset tummy, just eat your breakfast faster. Great question. Separate your copper from everything else. Yes, ma'am, all the way over in the corner hiding out there. Yes. She asked, do you have to worry about drug interactions? Yes and no. No, there is no known negative side effect, no known, but what will happen if you mix a pharmaceutical with it, you'll neutralize the effects of the copper. This is not a cheap supplement, and the last thing you want to do is diminish its ability. So you always keep your RXs, I like to say 2 hours away, but at least 30 minutes away as well. So the same rule applies. So thank you for bringing it up. Another great question to other nutraceuticals that it does to RXs. Yes. If my child, yes, if my child on a detox protocol, is it okay to take this at the same time? Well, I'm going to have to revert to I'm sorry, you're going to have to talk to your doctor and make sure whoever gave him that detox protocol. You know, there's some really smart doctors that we all work with here, and the last thing I ever want to do is be disrespectful to one of them or try to step into their protocol. So no matter what I say, please check with them first. But I would say it would only enhance any detox protocol because that's going to help push the cells. You're still, as long as you're already purging the lymphatic, you're having a way to do the pool, it would certainly, you know, without, you know, looking at everything and not being your doctor, of course, and not trying to interfere with your relationship with your doctor, the short answer would be yes. But again, check with your doctor. Yes. Sorry. Yes. Okay. He's bringing up copper zero. Do you want to know what the benefits are or what's the relationship? Absolutely. Okay, let's understand something. Copper technology started in Egypt. It started 5,000 years ago. And when you were sick in Egypt 5,000 years ago, all food was eaten off a copper plate, and all water was drinking out of a copper vessel. And if you go where cultures are, I say more advanced. Some people would look at them and say they're less advanced, but I say they're more advanced because they're doing things that are natural and right for our body. You would always store your water in a copper vessel overnight because copper, again, is God-given antibacterial. And we don't want to drink these bacteria. So the copper will neutralize the bacteria. Okay. So the kind of coppers that are good for us, of course, I don't want to eat this, but there's a lot of benefits of copper zero. And there's a lot of benefits of copper one. Not so much the plant copper, though. So yes, there's benefits, and that's why, and I could go on a lot deeper in that, but that's the quick answer. Yes. Sorry. That's great. So you can get that. You can get like there's a few copper sulfate. What's really interesting is when I go to these companies that all make this copper. Now I'm talking to them, and we finally got their attention. You know, I have to go in there and tell them, "Hey, man, what you're making is poison, and you're screwing everybody up. You got to stop doing it." It doesn't work very well. So what I actually do is I go in there and I say, "You make the most amazing copper for agriculture." And if you could find agriculture to actually care about their customers, or you can find an organic grower, you've got a great customer, and they're going to fix a problem. So you give them the problem solution together, of course. So a quick clarification on the right way to take the copper. No, it's not. She asked if she ate peanut butter afterwards if the copper became toxic. No. And the pH of your stomach can, for the most part, really hold. You know, it really can. So. It won't neutralize it. Yeah, I guess neutralize could be okay. Well, you would diminish a little bit. If you can give it a little bit of time for all the copper to absorb before you eat, you won't lose any of it. No one will go down the toilet. You don't want to. So, yeah, that's it. You excrete a little more. Yes, ma'am. Great question. Copper, it works to get rid of unwanted bacteria. Does it affect the other bacteria? And the answer is yes. Copper is the way that our bodies deal with bacteria. And when you eat plant copper, do you know what that does to the bacteria? The bacteria that we do not want in our cells, it feeds it. It feeds it. Right, so good bacteria it likes, it helps, and bad bacteria it doesn't. Yes, and it knows the difference because it all boils down to charge. Because there's bacteria stuck outside of the cell. That's what monopolizes it. And it's when the bacteria goes from one cell to the next because it doesn't stay in there forever. Great question. If we want to add it into our supplement, how long till we can see a benefit or we would know that it was good for us? For some people, as little as 30 seconds. For most people, no longer than 30 days. And the real answer to that is, if you feel like total crud, you're going to notice it right away. But if you feel pretty good, you probably won't notice it. So if you don't feel bad in the first place, it's not going to make you feel beyond that. So it just depends on where you're personally at. But I can guarantee you, for those that are really suffering, really, really bad, it's acute. Go ahead. Does it make you nauseous? Do you need to build up? Sometimes if you take it on an empty stomach, yes. Sometimes if you have a super, super toxic liver system, yes. And that's a great gauge. If you take some copper and all of a sudden it's because it's a detox reaction. And so, yes, you have to build up slowly to that. So again, if it does make you nauseous, doesn't mean that it's bad or it doesn't work for you. It means you need to slow down and eat it with a little bit of blah food. Yes, Pat. Okay, She asked, what happens when I introduce the copper underneath my fancy-dancy microscope looking at live blood? That's a great question. So I want to tell you something that's very interesting about that, and I think we're almost out of time here. But so you have two forms of copper here, plant copper and human copper. And what I like to do is I like to take live living blood, put it in a microscope, and watch the blood. And then I like to see the reaction of chelates. You know, your blood doesn't lie. And something's good for my body, and I put it in the blood loves it. I'm a little, I feel, you know, okay, I might stick that in my mouth. But if I stick something in my blood and I see how my blood die and run from it, I'm like, I'm probably not going to put that in my mouth, right? So what's interesting is when you take this copper, the blue copper, the plant copper, and well, let me just back up a little bit. We took 3 time-lapse videos. The first video is live blood, and we don't touch it. We take a picture every 20 minutes. Okay, and we watch the reaction. The second video is we take some plant copper, and we mix it with a little water, and we introduce it to the live blood, and we take 20-minute pictures. And then the third video, we take some Kudama human copper, and we introduce it into the blood, and we take 20-minute pictures. Okay, first picture, all the bacteria that's hiding in the cells stays hiding in the cells. You can't see it. Until the blood dies days later, you're never going to see it. Second picture, with the plant copper, almost identical reaction to no copper. Third picture, human copper, within 10 to 30 minutes, if there's bacteria hiding in your body, it's everywhere because it can't deal with it. The bacteria is running for its life, and it's dying before your eyes because proper copper, human copper, says, get the hell out of here. God didn't want you here in the first place. Yes, comes running out of the cells like crazy. Like crazy. And the best part is then it loses its shield because these bacteria put a lipid bilayer of their host on them and the immune system can't see them. And when copper's introduced, that lipid bilayer comes off and then you get to watch macrophages eat them. And macrophages are pretty freaking cool to watch eat stuff. Yes, go ahead. If somebody had a surgery, how could that help? So post-recovery, you know, again, help the body help itself. When our body's healing, it needs more ATP to glue ourselves back together. So absolutely it will help minimize the recovery time. Yes, sir. Yes. So he asked, I have someone low zinc, high copper. That's everyone in the room almost. We're all high copper with plant copper. We're all starving for human copper. So, yes. Yes, but it's not as fast as you want, and if you don't have all the other missing pieces, you can't increase your seroplasm level to bring out the bad copper. There's some other pieces that we may work on in the future. When you give your body all the missing pieces, then you can start talking about seroplasm and watching your seroplasm levels come up to pull out bound copper. Yes, Marge? She said that when you're taking proper copper, you're going to watch a fluctuation in copper levels go up and down, and she's spot on. As your body starts to turn on and it starts to go back to a copper hemostasis, you're going to see a fluctuation in your levels. Oh, so Marjorie's bringing up, I was asked about after surgery, what are the benefits of the copper, and I was... ATP will help your body heal. She does bring up another great point is, you know, in surgery, they put a lot of chemicals in you. And you need to get those out of you, right? So again, you want to turn the cell on and you want to push those all out. Okay, I want to thank everybody. Thank you for coming out here. I don't have any more minutes. They've shut me off, so thank you, everybody. Wait, what do you want, Marge? All right, she wants me to talk about humic acid, fulvic acid. So again, we do a push-pull when it comes to detoxing the body. We give the copper, we push it out of the cell, and then we pull it out of the body with our mud baths because we have a humic acid and a fulvic acid. So the reason we really love these mud baths is, first of all, the nutrition, because skin being the biggest organ, loves that nutrition, and then it's the binding effect to pull the toxins out of the body. Because the last thing we want to do is push toxins out of people we care about and then let them go to another cell. It's like a tease, and they go through that for nothing. All right, so please come by our booth. There's a Mommy and Me packet. Everybody got a thing, and I can answer more questions afterwards because I don't want to get into the next person's time. But I'm more than happy to stay and answer questions. There you go. You can kill me.